G'day folks, my name is Rob and welcome back for another F1 Fantasy live stream. I think everything is working. Maybe a little bit of a preseason test of my own with the next stream coming up right before the Australian Grand Prix qualifying deadline. But I hope you're very well. Sunday afternoon where I am, Sunday night for the folks in UK and Europe, and I assume it's a early morning for anyone in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So I hope you guys have had a good weekend. Thought I'd put this together spontaneously. I was like, look, I'm not doing much this Sunday afternoon, so why don't we just talk about some F1 fantasy? I know there's probably a lot of people who are disconnecting for the weekend, but for those of you that are jumping in for the stream, always an absolute pleasure to have you on here. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you're watching it later in the week, hopefully it helps in any capacity. But yeah, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Engineered Physique, Nixie, Speed and Power, Anurag, great to have you guys all here. It's late at night for you, Anurag, at 1:30 in the morning. Hope you had a good weekend, guys. I'm trying to also tweak the overlays a little bit. I'm not sure, as you all know, technical difficulties are a strong suit of these live streams. So thought I'd take off the live chat and maybe just leave it to just the screen plus the countdown time of 5 days, 8 hours, 9 hours until the Australian Grand Prix qualifying deadline. Yeah, 1:30 in the morning. Got to respect the hustle. Heading into a new week for an F1 fantasy stream. We'll probably do this for about an hour. See how we go. I got a couple of things on later I need to attend to before the night is or the day is out. But for a pretty chilled Sunday, thought may as well give this a go. May as well start off with a couple of questions in the chat. Is it worth trying to make the perfect draft now when things will become clearer in free practice? My thought is to understand the meta but remain flexible. Which constructors perform better at Australia than Bahrain historically, and can we apply that to this year with different regulations? A very good question. I mean, I'll be completely honest. If you've seen me putting drafts up on Twitter, if you've seen my videos, my latest drafts, it's all so theoretical. It's so early. I'm so aware of that. Like, so much is going to change in free practice. I tell you right now, the draft you see here on screen probably won't be the team I have come the deadline. It might well be, but we know how much free practice can upend our decisions. And I fully expect that to be the case this time around because we're only going off what we've seen in preseason. And I think a lot of teams will ramp up their engine modes come free practice. So, you know, this is one of two teams I'm set on right now with running at the deadline. If you saw my latest drafts video the other day, you probably know what those two teams are. But yeah, I'm trying to remain flexible. I think it's important to be flexible with your team setup, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I like this one. We'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, I think flexibility is important, being able to react to those free practice times, as you say, engineered physique. In terms of which constructors perform better at Australia than Bahrain historically, it's a tricky one because, yes, I think there's no doubt a trend the last couple of years. I think Ferrari have been relatively competitive, maybe not so much last year, but the years preceding that they were. It was Mercedes, McLaren, and Max Verstappen that were kind of the top dogs in there, despite obviously Oscar spinning out last year. But I think it's going to be a bit different this time around because of just the way the cars operate. And I don't think necessarily a trend of a team performing well at a certain track is wholly representative of how they might do in the future races at that same circuit. But I think we have certain yardsticks from Bahrain testing that I'm sure will be helpful. And I do think we'll know by the time we get to free practice whether or not that performance in Bahrain from, say, maybe a Ferrari is actually going to be the case as well in Australia. So I think being flexible and open-minded about your team setup and that is all well and good. I think it's something to think about. Nixie, how are you, mate? Rob, you did one with the rank. Yeah, P1. Of course, we're all P1 in the global ranks. It's the highest I'll ever be in F1 fantasy, so I may as well take the W. Guy asked, did you watch MotoGP? I didn't, actually. I really want to get into MotoGP more this season because it does look like such a good spectacle. Admittedly, I probably watch more of F2 and a little bit of FE than I would MotoGP, but I think I want to try, follow a team or a driver this season. So if you've got any recs, let me know. I'll absolutely keep tabs on MotoGP for 2026. Speed and Power was asking, what do you think of Bottas, Hadjar, Behrman, Lawson, Oscar, 2X, Haas, and Mercedes? I think that's good. It's pretty good. I think that's got a lot of budget upside for sure with like Haas, Bottas, Behrman in there. But Hadjar's an interesting one for me. I find like he's at a very awkward price point. It almost feels like a bit of a dead zone between, Lewis Hamilton and the Aston Martin assets. Like any asset in between like that range, I'll show you what I mean by that. If we sort by value, it's like Hamilton I think can be viable, but right now I'm not so excited about it. And then like Hadjar, Gasly, Sainz, Albon, Alonso and Stroll, they just feel very meh at their price especially. So I think, if you can, obviously having Mercedes is clutch. I think they'll be very good in Australia, but if there's a way, obviously if you're having Mercedes with a premium A-tier driver, then you're probably having to again like compromise on other parts of your team. So I think I like the bones of that team. I think Hadjar is just the tricky one because obviously you can't really go up to anyone higher than him to run Mercedes. Spurs are actually awful, aren't they? I am so worried Tottenham are going down. A couple of weeks ago I was like, nah, it'll be fine. But where are they on the ladder? I know we've gone straight into, they're still 16th. Okay. A couple of weeks ago I was like, nah, they'll be fine. But 4 losses on the bounce and only 4 points above relegation. That is really worrying. I'm getting a little nervous. 10 games to go as well. That's not good. Not a great start for Tudor. Tudor went mad in his presser. I'm sure he did. I've been so out of touch with the Prem this weekend. I've had a few other things on, so I haven't kept tabs on even my FPL team that much. Chelsea, how did they go? They lost to Arsenal, didn't they? Yeah. So, because had they Chelsea? Yeah, it was 2-1, wasn't it? Yeah, it was 2-1. There we go. You must be mad as a Chelsea fan, AK. 100%. Hey Rebecca, how are you? Great to have you here. Kuko says he or she is a little lost. Oh, don't worry, I am too. I think I'm no closer to deciding on my final team right now, but I do want to kind of talk about this one in just a second. I think the question, Nixie, was about Bahrain because of what we saw in testing. Like that was where we saw performance of those cars couple weeks ago. So I think the question was like, will performance there correlate from preseason to Australia round 1? Rosseek is definitely underway. I'm so pumped. This time next week, the first race of the season will be over. I'm so excited. I didn't watch any motorsport this weekend. I haven't watched any sport this weekend for that matter. So no IndyCar, no MotoGP. Maybe Aston Martin Predator X is the team to follow in MotoGP because I do think if their car in Formula One is an absolute dog, then hopefully there's reasons for optimism elsewhere. Okay, one question. Let's do a couple more questions on fantasy, then I'll talk you through my lineup. So AK was asking what would be the template for a AA constructor team. So it's probably one of this. I'd say that the leading candidates for a 2A constructor team is probably that, or you're dropping Behrman down to Perez, and then slotting in Mercedes over Haas. Like that's probably like the kind of bones of the 2A premium constructor build with Leclerc. I guess you also have with 0.3 in the bank. I'd probably opt for one of Bortoletto or Lawson over Lindblad in the first race, but promisingly there is no rain forecast for Australia at this point in time, so a good sign for Lindblad. I don't think he'll, fingers crossed, be in the same situation like most other rookies last year where they all DNF'd. So yeah, I could see a lineup like this coming through. Michael, who's one of the members of the channel, along with AK and Rebecca, was saying in my Discord earlier that Racing Bulls didn't really run a full spec in preseason testing, so they might actually be rolling out some upgrades in free practice for Australia from what they were running a couple weeks ago. So keep an eye on Racing Bulls. They could be a sneaky good pick. And the Constructor I'm seeing is making making its way into more fantasy teams. So, you know, I don't hate the idea of a Racing Bulls lineup. So yeah, to answer your question, AK, I think it's probably either this or the Red Bull Behrman lineup that we had on screen earlier. Obviously, with Red Bull Behrman, I don't think you can obviously squeeze in Lawson there. So that's where Lindblad obviously comes into play. Yeah, something like that. Either or. How is Sainz and Hulk 37% owned? Great question. I reckon people just love Sainz. He's just a popular driver to root for. I mean, he's one of my favorite drivers after Oscar and Pierre. But yeah, I don't know. The Williams is dreadful. And like I said, that dead zone between 22 mil and 8 mil, like Sainz is right in there. So we need to see more from Williams before I genuinely think they become viable in fantasy. Lannister, thank you. Great to have you back in the chat, my friend. Why Lindblad over Checo? I get the double Cadillac can be a bit risky, but isn't Checo a way more reliable driver? And with Ferrari engine and probably starting from the back, he could overtake. I mean, yeah, of course. It's a very valid question. I think in this kind of lineup or similar lineup, I'm reluctant to run 2 Cadillac assets. And I'm not... I agree, like, he is reliable. I think he's got better race pace than Valtteri as well. But running 2 Cadillac assets in the same team does feel a little risky for me. Obviously, if one driver DNFs doesn't necessarily mean that the other would. But it also does feel like a little bit of overexposure to the Ferrari power unit, which is one of the reasons why I feel like I'm getting a little bit of cold feet on that triple Haas double Ferrari lineup. It looked good in preseason for sure, but I'm personally of the view that if we can maybe just spread our risk at least for the first couple races to feel out where the reliability is and isn't, it mightn't be the worst idea. But again, I'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think the reason Bottas is simply favoured right now over Perez is the 5-place grid penalty and the $0.1 million saving. So obviously, to have a lineup like this, you can't squeeze Perez in either. So you'd have to go for both. But yeah, I don't know who is buying Carlos Sainz. I don't know who is buying Hülkenberg. And then, what's the pick percentage? And then the 16% who own Fernando Alonso is absolutely mind-boggling. He was 15% the other day, and he's gone up 1%. Like, who is buying Fernando Alonso? That's one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries right now, is who owns Fernando Alonso. And don't tell me it's an autofill team, because there are people out there who are willingly choosing him on their own accord. Techers, who featured in one of the questions in my video recently, is asking, I am fairly new to this. Is the priority to go big constructor or big driver? The team on screen suggests it should be big constructor. Do you also like to leave money in the bank so you can move easier? Yeah. So fantasy, I think it's an interesting game in the sense that, you know, you can go big constructor, you can go big driver. I think there's many different ways to score points and build budget in F1 fantasy. Even though this is the team on screen doesn't necessarily mean it's the best team. But I will say traditionally, the way the game has been played has been to pick a top tier constructor and pick a good 2x driver to start with building your team. So if for instance, let's just empty this out entirely. If I was new to the game, I had no idea about the rules, but I kind of, if someone had no idea about the rules and I was to make a recommendation how to start out building a team, I would pick a team from the top group of assets. So one of these guys priced above 23 million. Let's say, just use Ferrari as an example here. And then I'd also choose a driver to get your 2x points. Now, of course, on face value, you could just go for Max Verstappen and Mercedes if you wanted to. But of course, there's going to need to be financial compromises elsewhere in the team. So you want a reliable driver in that 2x slot because, of course, if they score 40 points or 20 points, their score would be doubled to 40 points. So that's very important to have that there. And then from there, to the extent you can also afford another top tier constructor, in the case of the lineup I just had on screen, Red Bull. But of course, if the lineup you want doesn't allow for that, then you probably want to opt for a team in the midfield, a constructor in the midfield that is good value for money. And Haas seems to be the name on a lot of people's dockets this season. And to the extent that you have Haas instead of a second big hitting constructor, then you might be able to afford someone like Kimi Antonelli, a driver from a top team, and then from there fill out the rest of your team based on what you think makes sense. You might want to have your favorite driver in there. You might want to have a driver from a certain team in there, type thing. And then obviously, like in the case of Valtteri Bottas, grid penalty, that kind of stuff. You want to strategically choose those midfield drivers that, as is the name of the game in F1 Fantasy for those back markers, you want those guys that will qualify at the back and then make up positions and score overtakes in the Grand Prix. An alternate variation of the lineup on screen here is this one. And I think that kind of answers your other question of, do you like to leave money in the bank so you can be flexible? Yeah, I think absolutely. I do think you want to have some flexibility, but you don't really want to be carrying more than 2 to 3 million in spare cost cap on the side, because it's not an investment. You're not making money with it sitting on the side. And I guess it also means, like, could you really deploy that money into another asset? So, for example, if we take Kimi Antonelli, with this same lineup, you can get Oscar Piastri as well. So if you think Piastri would do better than Antonelli because it's in Australia, it's Oscar's home race, then perhaps maybe Oscar is the better option of the two. So I wouldn't really aim to have more than 2 to 3 million in spare cost cap. Do you consider, Nixie's asking, any one big constructor or one big driver lineups, or just 2A driver or 2A constructor? I think it's hard, especially on non-sprint races, to just have one A-tier constructor and A-tier driver, because Mercedes is a great example of that, right? So, if you wanted, let's say George is P1 in all 3 free practice sessions, and you want him in your team, it's hard to deviate from that. The closest you can get is like 1A.5 in Hadjar. Like he's B obviously, but he's a premium B, and it's very difficult to run a lineup like this without obviously having to sacrifice the second premium driver slot. So for me, I think Nixie, like, finding that balance is probably as cliched as it is, like finding that balance between where you think the value is and where you think the points are. The problem I have with, say, George Russell, for instance, being so expensive is that just about any driver is capped on a non-sprint weekend. And we're realistically looking at drivers like Max, Lando and George, right, who are 27 odd million. Their ceiling on a non-sprint weekend is probably 35, 40 points max. And we can go over to F1 Fantasy Tools, just to give you a better idea of that. Of course, if you hit pole position, race win, fastest lap, and driver of the day, like that's a pretty big boon of points. And Lando is, I think, the exception to the rule in Australia last year, where he hit all of those. Pole position, race win, a couple of overtakes, and all of those. The likelihood of that happening for any driver on a non-sprint weekend is very rare. So that was actually Lando's highest score in F1 Fantasy last year, his 59 in Australia. He didn't get anywhere close to that pretty much. His next best score was 55 in Miami, but that, again, was a sprint race weekend. The next time, again, his next highest score was 49 in Brazil. If we take a look at all of the non-sprint weekends, filter them out here, it's going to be very hard to get anywhere close to that 59, 60 point ceiling unless it's a sprint weekend. So, of course, again, the 59 that Lando had in Australia, right? But then like Max's highest non-sprint score, 56 in Vegas. I think he had actually all of those as well, right? Your fastest lap driver of the day. Oscar's highest non-sprint weekend, I think, was Zandvoort, 45, and then 45 again in Bahrain. So he had one of those two, but then, pole Grand Prix win and one of the fastest lap driver of the day. Kimi again, 35 in Canada. Leclerc didn't win a race last year, and then Russell's 47. So I think realistically, even if you get close to hitting those, like all of those or most of those metrics, seldom do you get in that ballpark of 57. I think it happened, like a score north of 45 happened once. I mean, that was 45 on the nose for Oscar twice. Second time, third time, fourth time. So yeah, it's rare. 4 times in 20 odd races or 18 races. It's not a high percentage in terms of being able to bang out all of those scores in one kind of fell swoop. Hopefully that answered your question. It was a super long-winded way of answering, but got there eventually. What kind of content are we in for this week, by the way? Chip strategy predictions, any streams? Yep. So the plan of attack for content this week will be team selection video tomorrow. My F1 article on f1.com will go out Wednesday at this point, and Thursday will be final thoughts. Stream will be Friday night my time. So I think it'll just be the standard team selection, final thoughts videos with an article and a live stream as well. I don't think I'm going to have time for anything additional, but there's hopefully enough content to sink your teeth into on the channel so far. I tried to load up last week, so there was enough for everyone. Yeah. I think it's people who own Alonso who want the lowest points possible. Lol. 15% of the play base is playing lowest points possible. And yeah, you're right, Rebecca. It probably is favorite driver. I get that. A lot of people do pick Alonso just for the fact he is their favorite driver. Do you think Haas will score more points than other A constructors? Probably not. I'd say very doubtful. And that's one of the reasons why looking ahead to China Sprint is one of the reasons why I'm getting a little uneasy about owning Haas. But let's answer a couple more questions, and then I'll show you my thoughts on why I'm leaning towards 2A constructors and a Leclerc. 2/3 of players pick with their heart, not strategy. You're right, William. Russell 2X and Mercedes. Yeah, I mean, like the lineup on screen here is probably the best Russell Mercedes lineup, in my opinion. I mean, where else do we sacrifice? Like, I think, is there another way to get better? Is there a way to get, let's say, I think there is, right? No, there isn't. I thought there was. You can't have George, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to own 2 Mercedes assets and another A tier. So in that sense, the pricing is good. Even with Lewis, you can't get to anything else. Sorry if I missed it. Any updated thoughts on balancing the first race of budget building with a lack of flexibility for the round 2 sprint? We'll talk about that in just a second, Silent Sinner. And how much do you weigh in good, bad history for a driver to track when deciding? Sometimes. I wouldn't say it's a defining factor, but I'm more concerned about their historical performance in a bad sense than a good sense. If they've had a lot of DNS, if they haven't really been able to qualify well, then that's going to make me overlook those assets that have struggled to break through in the past. Yeah, William, we're going to discuss my Team 2 picks. Right now, it's the Haas triple up and Ferrari double up. That's my Team 2. But yeah, let's talk about my team because I want to reason a little bit more with what I'm landing on. Let's just zoom in and zoom out, refocus the page. So there's a couple of reasons why I'm more leaning towards this for Australia at the moment because of the fact that it has more flexibility than the Haas lineup. And I say that because mostly, and of course Mercedes could slot in here as well, because earlier in the video you could do a Perez Mercedes in for Behrman and Red Bull. But the kind of thought process behind it is having two premium constructors for the China Sprint. I do worry Haas are not going to have the firepower to, over consecutive weeks, and especially on a sprint weekend, match up to the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes. And unless, of course, there's a DNF, which throws a spanner in the works, Haas would have to have dreadful qualifying results in all of Australia and the China Sprint qualifying and the Grand Prix qualifying to get close to matching the level of production. There's obviously the argument for budget building, and I think the Haas triple up is a huge advantage. But for me right now, I like this because in 2 moves in China, right, I can get to, I mean, this is all budget or price change dependent. So this idea could be completely out the window by the time we get to China, right? But, you know, there is, as of right now, and maybe I opt for Lawson if I start out this way, so there's more flexibility to pivot down, is I could potentially get to, you know, the Red Bull. I'd have to run Lindblad though, that's the problem. So I'll just leave Lindblad in now for argument's sake. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it gives me 2 moves to pivot into either Red Bull, or from Red Bull to Mercedes, or Mercedes back to Red Bull. So yeah, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here. Let's just leave Lindblad in and leave and Behrman in. So this theoretically could be my team at the deadline for Australia. Assuming price changes work favorably, in 2 moves for the China Sprint, I could pivot into Mercedes and Checo Perez. This is, again, price change dependent, of course. It could go up in flames. The problem I have with Haas, right, is if we were to just empty out the team a little bit here and populate it with the Haas constructor, which I think budget building wise is the best lineup at this point in time. So we have these guys and Kimi, right? So if I started out with a team like this and I wanted to move to an A-tier constructor in China, it would take me, I couldn't get there in 2 moves, theoretically speaking. Red Bull, of course, but I only have 5.1 million. So I would have to drop probably Ocon in that case to bring in Perez and Colapinto for argument's sake. Again, price change dependent. And that would be a -10 for the second race of the season. So it's harder to go from the Haas lineup to a Red Bull/Mercedes lineup than it is to go from Red Bull, Mercedes into Haas. And I know, everyone has their preferences. Of course, you're sacrificing budget building a little bit. And again, like you could also the other way around. Let's say Haas have a stinker in qualifying in China, and there's optimism that they'll make up positions and overtakes in the Grand Prix, right, or in the sprint race. Let's say again, let's start out with the Red Bull lineup I had on screen before, right? So my thought process here would be I could get to Haas in 2 moves quite comfortably if I really thought they'd be good. Let's remove Checo. So starting out, let's say I go into Australia with this lineup, right? Come out of Australia and we get to the China Sprint qualifying. Haas look the real deal, budget gain, points upside with overtakes. In 2 moves, I can drop Red Bull and Checo Perez to Haas and Kimi Antonelli. Now I'm carrying a little bit on the side, of course, but again, I can get there in 2 moves. So it's much more flexible, I think, for my team to go from the 2A constructor into a 1A constructor and 1B constructor than it is to go from the Haas lineup back to the premiums. Hopefully that made sense, but I'm just trying to look at flexible options so I have more room to pivot if there's a shift in practice or in sprint qualifying that makes me want to go a certain direction. And I think starting out with Haas does limit that flexibility just a little bit, but it does have the budget building upside. And the other thing I will say as well is if you're really angling to use the limitless chip in China, if you're so confident that that's the right play for you, and I think there's certainly an argument to go down the China route, then I would probably start out with the Haas team because they've got that budget upside that a Red Bull or a Mercedes lineup with Ferrari and Charles just wouldn't offer. the same way. If you're carrying, a team like this into, theoretically, a team like this into China, and then you activate the limitless. Hang on, no, what have I done here? Not Colapinto, it would be Antonelli. But if you had a team like this heading into China, then a lot of these guys probably should go up in value, assuming Australia is good to them. So I think this lineup is much more viable for Australia if you are planning the limitless in China. But again, it's all very team strategy dependent. What do you think of McLaren and Mercedes? Curtis is asking. I think in terms of a double constructor pairing, I haven't seen so many of those going around, honestly. I feel like for the same price, to obviously have both of them, I don't think you can even you can't get a second, like a 2X driver. In isolation, I think Mercedes, when you're only paying $0.4 million more, is just the clear-cut better option, in my opinion. Preseason, they look much more reliable, consistent, and value-wise, I think there's just a bit more output there than McLaren. Now, the Fantasy Tool Sims paint a slightly different story, but one for one, I'd back Mercedes, even if it is for a slightly higher price. To have both in your team, though, I just don't think there's enough value in the McLaren Constructor to justify having that. At that point, you're just better off, I think, dropping to Ferrari because, of course, if you want to run both, let's just drop in the 3 cheapest assets in the game. Your 2X is going to be Hadjar. And I just don't trust someone like Isaac Hadjar with the 2X. So super risky play if you went down that route. But again, pick your poison if you're bullish on these two guys and the hope Hadjar just kind of trots along with 20 points, 15 points, then so be it. All right, what else have we got? Is Alpine overlooked by lots of people? Curtis is asking. I think so, but they're just at a weird price. I think for similar production at that point, just go for VCub or Haas. Sidsy's asking, have you gone over any major new tips or anything I missed? Not really. We just talked about a couple of different lineups so far. My thoughts around planning for the China Sprint with my lineup. And yeah, you're right, Rebecca. Like Hulk it's so random in fantasy. Like Hulk, banged out 40 odd points, 45 points last season. So you just don't know what to expect from him. Those midfield assets. And that's the thing, like because it's so unpredictable, Gasly could score exactly the same as someone like Bottas. And for that reason, it's like just the awkward price point for these guys. What are you getting out of someone like Hadjar or Gasly that you're not getting similarly pound for pound from a Haas driver, for example? Of course, the Mercedes power unit, I think, is an argument for Gasly. But again, we won't know that until we get to free practice. And then all of a sudden, he could be fifth on the road. And at that point, then perhaps he is viable. But right now, I haven't seen enough from Alpine to warrant, again, inclusion in our teams because of just simply the price. That's pretty much it, because they are pretty similar to Haas in terms of current performance from what we've seen. If you take on Haas with Leclerc and Kimi, how do you move to 2A Constructor? You can, but you're taking a hit, a -10 Lannister. So I think I explained that. But yeah, it's trickier to go from the Kimi, Leclerc, Haas, Ferrari build than it is to go back the other way. I think Cadillac drivers are risky. They have yet to complete a single race, so my differential is to avoid them. That's a fair strategy. Do it. I think having one Cadillac asset is fine, and I think most people would say Bottas is the guy right now. But again, there's obviously reliability concerns for that team, and there may be a world in which after China, also after Australia, there's obvious worries around their ability to keep the engine running for an entire race distance. Jeremy, how are you, mate? Good to have you here. It's Monday morning, I'm assuming, for you. Do you think McLaren could be an option in a 2X premium constructor lineup? Went to Chiefs Crusaders Saturday. It was a time. Oh, I have not really watched the Rugby Championship at all the last couple of years. Well, it's not the Rugby Championship, is it? Is that what it's called? It's not Super 14 anymore, is it? Or is it Rugby Championship? Because I'm thinking of like Argentina, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia. I don't even know what that Super 12, Super 14 competition is called, but I hope your team got up. I just think, yeah, with McLaren again, it's tricky. Okay, like what does a lineup with McLaren look like, right? You can't get to, I mean, where you're again having to drop, like to get Charles in, right? You can get, Hulk, for example. Just not seeing it. I'm just not seeing enough from McLaren. Again, at that point, why don't you just go for Mercedes? I just think McLaren they're the second highest priced team, but they're anywhere between second and fourth in terms of performance at this point, I think. So it's hard to justify, like, what's their ownership right now? 18%. So higher than I thought, but lower than Mercedes and Ferrari. Ferrari's actually come down a little bit, so that's a good sign in that sense. Surely Haas are not the highest owned. Interesting. I mean, I think it goes to show how undervalued both of these teams are, that their ownership's so high. Why not play Limitless in China? I can't think of a reason. I can think of plenty of reasons why not to play Limitless in China. Running Rabbit, Verstappen 2x, Hamilton Sainz, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Alpine, Audi with 6.2 remaining agent experience in these new regulations. That's funny. I don't hate that at all. AK's asking, do you think a pro Merc strat could work for one of the three teams? It's basically anti-template, Merc, Russell, Alpine, Triple R. I mean, that was a lineup I was looking at in one of my drafts, and I got laughed out of the room. So yeah, it's, again, I think Alpine don't seem that popular right now in F1 Fantasy based on their price, but I think a lot could change in free practice. And, there's certainly a world where we get to Thursday, Friday, right? And, suddenly a team like this looks very, very attractive. Would I go there right now? No, but if Gasly, to go the constructor route, I mean, you kind of have to, at that point, it's probably better value than Gasly, right? But it's a hard one. That's probably the optimal or the preferred Mercedes power unit lineup I'd go if you wanted to go Alpine and Merc. Ollie B2, surely not Ollie Behrman. Any thoughts of wanting to be different compared to all these Ferrari and Triple Haas teams? Well, that's kind of why I'm looking at these Ferrari and Red Bull lineups. Because you have a little bit of Haas, but not too much. And again, another worry of mine is, what if a Haas driver DNFs? Like, you're going down the gurgler in the first race if Behrman or Ocon absolutely stink it up, right? So I'm a little reluctant to, run that risk. But for budget building, if all goes well, then, Behrman and the Constructor and Ocon, I think, are certainly viable options. All right. What else have we got? Just over halfway through the stream, guys. So drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm assuming everyone in the chat has subscribed because I've got the old subscriber mode turned on. Yeah, I mean, like, again, to your point, AK, maybe I do have one of my teams run a team like this on screen, but I don't know if it's a team one strat for me at the moment. Isn't Mercedes supposed to be way better than Red Bull? Why even consider Red Bull even if they did turn their engine down in Bahrain? Because the Red Bull route has more budget flexibility. The thing that's hard for me to stomach right now with a lineup like this, right, is, so let's just go back to a team I had before. It would be the four lowest priced drivers in the game, give or take 0.3 million. I mean, if I dropped Charles to Lewis, right, 0.6, I still can't really get too much more than just Hulk, right? So I'd probably prefer Charles. And then, for argument's sake, let's just say this is the team, right? You've got The problem I have with this team, just a little bit, but not much, is that there's no flexibility. There's just no transfer flexibility in the following weeks. Because if Perez or Bottas or both, or even Colapinto for that matter, have stinkers in Australia, right, and they're going down in value and you need to move off them immediately, like where do you go from there? You can't do a 1-for-1 swap because there's no one priced lower than they are. So the sacrifice has to be the Constructor or Charles. And I just don't think at Charles' price, there's really an option beyond Lewis. At 0.3 million, I'm taking Charles any day of the week. So like, who do you swap out? It's probably Mercedes or Ferrari, right? So if you went Ferrari at that point, you're probably best off going all the way down to Haas. I haven't seen too many Mercedes Haas lineups, honestly. And then you've got 15 million to spend, which even if you took the most expensive driver, is not going to be enough to get anyone else. Like your 0.1. Again, these are all price change dependent. After Australia, like there might be flexibility to move to Lewis. But if you can't do that, then you've got to go Hadjar or take a -10 and take out Colapinto as well. In that case, then go Hamilton. Again, you haven't got enough. So you're probably ending up keeping Ferrari, right? And then having to move to Haas, moving off Mercedes. Moving off Mercedes before a sprint weekend doesn't really sound that great. So I just think there's a lot less flexibility with these kind of Mercedes heavy builds with Ferrari and Leclerc as well. I think that was Ollie's question. Concerning chip strategy, what do I think about Lawson? I think he's great. At his price, he's got value for sure. And Racing Bulls might be better in free practice than we got the impression in preseason. Concerning chip strategy, is Limitless better in a place like Miami, Montreal, or Monaco? Yes, Guy. I think Japan and Monaco are going to be the best options for chips, or could potentially be the best options for the Limitless chip this season. More on that to come on my channel, but there is definitely a argument in favor of using the Limitless chip at a low overtake track after a sprint race because of the budget building upside you have from the trailing averages. And on sprint weekends, you tend to score more. Assets tend to score more than non-sprint weekends. And so by that logic, there's a higher likelihood of price rises in the subsequent weeks after sprints. And we've got Japan after China and Monaco after the Miami-Montreal double header. So if you time your transfers right and you end up on the assets most likely to rise in value, you could really maximize the likelihood of those price gains while using Limitless in a place like Japan or Monaco. So lots to think about. I've got some analyses coming in the next week or so on that. So I won't have time to put that video out this week, but yeah, lots to think about. Varela, Castorena, Russell, Hadjar, Behrman, Colapinto, Bottas. That looks good. Sorry if we've gone over this. Just joined up. What do you think of the Russell, both Haas, Hadjar, Bottas, Mercedes, Haas? Yeah, Beast, that sounds good, I think. My question right now is Behrman and Red Bull versus Mercedes and Lawson. Fairly set on the rest. Yeah, I think that's a question I'm grappling with too, Techers. Hey, Michael. Hope you're well, mate. Yeah, I was on the Dirty Side podcast with Brian and Rob yesterday. I didn't know it was up on YouTube yet, or at Spotify. So I'll have to share that later. Yeah, you're not wrong. Not wrong, Rebecca. Team calculator has McLaren, Leclerc, Ferrari, Bottas, Lawson, Bortoleto, Colapinto. So yeah, let's look at the team calculator. The thing is, yeah, there's a lot of variation. It just feels, again, like quite a tricky lineup. Like Leclerc, as you can tell, the best value for money driver based on these projections, right? And for anyone who's not familiar with this website, it's f1fantasytools.com. To use their premium features, you can get a discount off your first month, 50%, by using code HUB50. Details of that are in the description below. But Yeah, there's a lot of favoritism towards McLaren in these simulations, but I definitely expect these points expectations or these points projections for the Papaya are going to come down in practice. I just think they're clearly third best. So yeah, it's tricky. Of course, there's like a little more flexibility running them over Mercedes, but I don't know. It's hard to predict McLaren. Again, like I said before, they could be second fastest, they could be fourth fastest. I just don't know. Thanks, AK. Hope you had a good weekend, Rebecca. Nixie's asking thoughts on starting with a team of Ferrari, Haas, Leclerc or Hamilton, Antonelli, Behrman, Colapinto, Bottas, and then do Haas to Mercedes and Piastri to the cheapest driver after Oz. Then you should be able to afford Ferrari, Mercedes, Leclerc or Hamilton, and Behrman. I mean, yeah, potentially. So the lineup Nixie's talking about looks something like this. I guess again, you're having to, you'd have to cut out to get ahead of the transfers. You're not running Ocon, right? To be flexible, you kind of have to be, let's say, on Colapinto instead, which I don't hate the idea of. You're carrying almost 4 million in spare cost cap, but sometimes these are the sacrifices that need to be made. And then the example Nixie's making is, do you run this team for a week and then when you get to China, potentially pivot to, again, price change dependent, or have I got that wrong? I don't think so. I don't think we can do that. It would have to, I think, price. So Nixie's saying we start with this and then you drop, you move to Mercedes, which again, I don't think you can do in 2 moves. Yeah, you can't. So again, that's another -10 off the rip. You have to start with Colapinto and then, so you'd have to start with Colapinto, I think. Okay, so you'd have to, it's still a -10 though. I'm almost certain it's still a -10 unless my math is completely off here. So you got Kimi, right? And then you'd still have to take a -10 to get a Mercedes. So it's just not feasible. I mean, maybe a -10 in the grand scheme of things is nothing compared to what you might score on a sprint, but it's tricky. And I just don't want to get into the habit of like having -10s kind of be the theme of my year in the second race. What do you think about, Hakon is asking, what do you think about Verstappen, Leclerc, Colapinto, Bottas, Bortoleto, Ferrari, Haas? Yeah, I think that looks good. I guess you don't have as much Haas exposure, but perhaps that's a good thing. Go for that set and forget max 2x. I think Sidzi, it's like you got to be open-minded about kind of what variations you can pivot into. But I think a lot of teams we will see start with something like this off the rip. I think you'll see a lot of teams with these 3 assets for the first race of the season, unless Ferrari are dreadful in practice. And yeah, Rebecca makes a great point. Another reason why like having flexibility is important is you don't want to have like 3 of the cheapest drivers in the game and not be able to pivot anywhere, because then that's where the constructors have to get swapped out and it becomes very difficult to make those sacrifices without taking hits. Hey, Rain, well, watching your stream, editing my own video. How you doing, mate? Have a good weekend. I have to say that collaboration video that you fired up did absolute numbers. Lots of engagement there. Quite pleased with the reception. I mean, I'm sure you're even more pleased it's not even a video on my channel. But yeah, lots of positive feedback from the collab. If you haven't checked out the video on Rain's channel, you and Adam and I sat down for half an hour, 45 minutes, and talked about the game changes, template lineups, and kind of what this means for the upcoming season. Lots of positive, a little bit of negative, but that's the beauty of the game we love, right? And I can give you an early insight into Rain's Rain's team of the week. He'll have it in his tips of the week, I'm sure, in his latest stream. But he let me in on a little secret before that this is the lineup he plans to run for Australia. So if he doesn't run this, then I request all of you to go into his comment section and tell him he's a coward. Because he did say to me on good authority that this is what he plans to run. As a content creator, Rain's pretty confident this is the way to go for Australia. What do you think, Russell, Hamilton, Ocon, Colapinto, Bottas, Ferrari, and Haas from Rocco Gattara? I think that looks good. I like all of those assets. If you've got 0.1 million, I'd maybe consider going Behrman over Ocon. But if you're squeezed to the nines, it's a fair team. Depending on, again, like budget available, I know Russell soaks up a lot of it. So could you get to Leclerc over Hamilton? Could you get to Behrman over Ocon? Otherwise, I think that looks good. All right, AK. Have a good one, mate. Thank you for coming through. I'll see you in the Discord. And yeah, thank you for hitting the like and subscribe, guys, if you haven't done that already. Rain's going to cook with that lineup, hack on. I know he will. If Perez drops 0.6 to 5.4 and then you gain 0.6 Haas over Merc gains, but that's too much an imaginable scenario. Yeah, I know, like, there's so many theoreticals, right? You want to rely, I don't want to rely too much on budget swings, because then if that's how I'm booking transfers without knowing how the price changes will go, then I'm in for a world of pain. Hakon suggested this exact team to all of his friends, which I think is the best way to win a mini league. If you saw my shorts, Audi Constructor is definitely not underrated. Or if Rain's saying Audi Constructor is underrated, but said no one ever. Aston, mate, good to have you in the chat, brother. Who's actually firing up the league this year? Is that something Lewis does? We'll talk about that later, Aston. It is tough on stream day. Collabs are exhausting. Yeah. Well, I can tell you right now, it's going to be the busiest deadline stream for Australia, because Zach's obviously back in the game now with doing his own channel stuff. So that would be me, Rain, Ewan, Zach, and Adam. There'll be 5 people streaming. I think Zach said he's doing a 3-hour stream, if I saw that. Or someone's doing a 3-hour stream. So there's gonna be a lot of F1 fantasy content next Friday. Thoughts on Alpine Constructor? I mean, I was talking about this before. I genuinely think Alpine, right now, they don't seem like value because they're at a price much higher than Haas and VCarb. But I guarantee you, if Colapinto and Gasly are both running inside the top 10 in free practice, that narrative shifts so quickly. And we just know that it's so speculative until you get to practice, like what a good lineup could look like. So again, I don't know. I think this is all very like pro Mercedes PU right now. But if these two teams look good again in free practice, if Mercedes and Alpine look good in free practice, I could see a lot of people running something like this, 6.7. So that would be like Lawson, Bortoletto, whoever you want to, or call it, or Lindblad, doesn't really matter. I could see a lot of people running a lineup like this if Mercedes and Alpine are looking the goods. Audi Constructor underrated when Hulk pulls up his random 20-pointer, but like that's when is that happening? Like Hulk was rubbish for all of the second half of last season, and then just bangs out a half decent Abu Dhabi result, if I'm not mistaken. And then, also has such random periods of time where he has such good form, and then DNFs 5 races in a row. In terms of fantasy assets, he's quite an interesting one for sure. Russ, Behrman. Yeah, I mean, like, where can you fit Behrman? I mean, you could do, instead of Gasly, right? Could you go Behrman in here and then like upgrade it to an Ocon? Like potentially, right? The thing is though, again, that's like quite inflexible, because if you're trying to get to a 2 premium constructor build for China, that's a -10 instantly. Unless I don't think you could do Ferrari, could you? Like, yeah. It's inflexible. You'd need to, like, again, take a -10 to get in Charles. Yeah, it's a bit messy. If you're going Mercedes Alpine, I think a Mercedes Alpine could be a Team 3 build, but there's just no flexibility there either for the first race, so it's tricky. Yeah, Michael, I'll be going to Zach's stream as well. I mean, it's nighttime where we are, right? So my stream will be from like 12 midnight through to 2 in the morning. Like, probably give this like 5-10 more minutes. Like, what's my time? Why don't they update it to 2026? I don't understand that. I'm pretty sure it's a midnight stream for me where I am, which makes it like early morning for my European friends. Sorry, it's midnight quali. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock for me. So that's not too bad. I'll definitely stay out for quali in that case. But yeah, it's not too bad. It's tougher for the guys in the UK, right? It's like 5 a.m. quali, and that would be like Zach. Yeah, so Zach and Ewan. Oh my days. They will be streaming in the dead of the night. But fair play to them. You got to respect the hustle, right? What is the league code at all? Is it not in the description? Sorry, techers. It should be in the description of all my other videos, but I'll update this after. Off the top of my head, I don't know it, but we could probably find out. That's the old Formula Fantasy Hub Members League. That's not the one we want. We want this one. The league code for my league is on the screen here if you haven't joined it. There's not that many people in there this year, but I don't really mind. The number of people in the league is the least of my worries. Hulk better than Hamilton? Probably. I had Hulk in Abu Dhabi. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you did too. Pain is imminent. Indeed it is. We talked about Gasly a little bit already. I think he seems good for points, but I think he's probably 2 to 3 million higher than I'd like him to be to make him an option. Thoughts on Verstappen, Behrman, Ocon, Bortoleto, Lawson? Who are the constructors? B-ball bios. Because I don't think you could have 2 premium constructors with that lineup. So on a non-sprint, not sure. Oh, Ewan at 3 a.m. Good luck to him. That makes it 4 o'clock his time, I'm pretty sure, as well. So anyway, that's the... these are my 3 teams right now. Just to give you an idea of where my head's at. All a little different, but I like them all. Maybe I need more Mercedes constructor coverage, but that's kind of what the third team does for me there. Do you think 2A constructors is essential in China? Yes, it is. Well, not essential, but I think you've got a significantly higher point ceiling with 2 premium A constructors in China. The only way Haas are a significantly viable option. They won't get close to the premium constructor scores, but both drivers have to qualify pretty low in the sprint and the Grand Prix and make up some positions to score decently. So that's why I'm slowly coming around to the idea of Team 1 on the left. Yeah, Hub 2, I could not tell you why that one's censored, but the other 2 are not. Especially because this is almost the exact same name, but one number different. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I think I might leave it there. It's been a good Sunday, spontaneous stream. 1 hour of just talking nonsense. I'm sure you guys don't mind it because it happens a lot. But I just wanted to put some thoughts out there. Always very robust. But yeah, I might leave it there. Be sure to drop a like on the way out. I got plenty more content this week. So I'll remind you, for those of you that came in a bit late, what the content schedule is for this week. So tomorrow, team selection video goes out. I haven't recorded that yet, so I'll probably do that in a few hours. And then, so Monday will be team selection. Tuesday, no content. Wednesday is my Formula1.com article where I'll be looking at all 11 teams and 22 drivers. Thursday is final thoughts. Friday is the Q&A live stream. So yeah, lots of content to sink your teeth into, but there's plenty more that the rest of the community will be going through. A lot of the creators have got a lot lined up. You and I think has got like one video a day for the next 6-7 days. So lots to look forward to, lots to get excited about. But yeah, I might pack things up for today, guys. As I said, on your way out, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, expect to see more of my face on here in the next few days. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you